Conservatives and Christians have been far too timid for far too long. I guess that's putting it politely. They've been cowards, and we were sold out by our leaders and representatives in Congress and in the churches, and kept pacified by political pundits and mainstream conservative Inc. talk show hosts who think that joking about people's pronouns and laughing at blue-haired teachers on TikTok is all that it's going to take to win the culture war and take this country back. But I think it's time to start giving the left a taste of some of their own medicine and playing by some of their rules. And it's time to get off social media and bring our message into the real world. Boycotting companies that are woke isn't enough. While it may cost them some loss of revenue, many won't even notice or care. I think we should start telling the stores, the store clerks, that their companies are woke and pathetic and perverted. We have to make the employees feel uncomfortable, even miserable. Hear me out. If the clerks can't get through a shift without being told off by a dozen customers every single day or every hour, they're going to complain to their managers. And the managers are going to report to the corporate office that selling woke products or promoting anti-white diversity initiatives or pushing LGBTQ propaganda is causing a hostile environment in the stores by customers. Many employees probably actually agree with us, but out of fear of losing their jobs, won't say anything themselves. So it's our job as the customers, because the customer is always right. You're thinking, well, it's not their fault. Why take it out on them? But that kind of thinking is what allows these corporations to continue getting more woke every year. Well, it's not some random clerk's fault what the corporation itself is doing. They are a vessel that can relay customers' dissatisfaction to those higher up the food chain. And they are the public face of the business and what it represents. Why should you stay silent and afraid to voice your complaints to a store employee? It's certainly going to be more effective than posting about it on Facebook. That's like shouting at a brick wall. It needs to be done in person, face to face. But we should also fill their Yelp and Google listings with negative reviews. Better yet, pick up the phone and start calling local branches and sound off. And do it every time any company crosses the line. They need to be sent a loud and sustained message. Same with the schools and our local state governments. Look up your congressman and senator's office phone numbers and those of your mayor and city council members and save them in your contacts in your phone like you would anyone else you frequently call. They can, and usually do, ignore tweets, Facebook comments, and emails. But if their office phone is ringing off the hook all day, every week, every time their aides and interns pick them up, they get an earful from upset constituents, they're not going to be able to just go about their day as usual. The congressman, the mayor, the school, or whoever will get the message. And as the cliche goes, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. It's usually a small but vocal and active group that causes large societal changes because most people sit on the sidelines and say or do nothing. Run for city council, mayor, and get on your local school board. Trying to fix the government from using a top-down approach will have a limited effect because of how gigantic the bureaucracy is, the number of obstacles that need to be overcome to achieve major changes. As president, Donald Trump tried, and while he had some major victories, like gaining a conservative majority in the Supreme Court and cutting a bunch of unnecessary regulations and using tariffs to help American workers so they weren't always getting screwed over by cheap foreign imports, he could only shift our nation's course a few degrees. A bottom-up approach is better in many regards because it can be done by ordinary people with limited resources. And being involved in local politics usually isn't as competitive as national offices because the field is less crowded. Taking control of our communities is not as difficult as people think. Just a small handful of active people can take over city councils and school boards. And most people only think about voting on election years for major positions like president, but local positions and midterm elections are just as important. During COVID lockdowns, for example, in 2020 and 2021, many sheriffs who are elected by voters refused to enforce state laws dictated by governors through executive orders, which mandated that restaurants not allow in-person dining. And even some sheriffs in major California cities refused to enforce the governor's rules. They allowed the businesses to stay open, and there was nothing that the governor could do to stop them. And be sure to look up your recommended voter guide for your city, which is put together by many local Republican parties, and use it as a guide to choose candidates you're not familiar with for various positions that don't have their party affiliation listed next to their name on the ballot. Many positions, like school board members, judges, and sheriffs, do not list whether a candidate is a Republican or a Democrat. So take advantage of the research in the voter guide your local Republican Party puts together. A quick Google search should bring it up. A word of caution about becoming politically active, though. Some people may want to start an organization or a group to fight for a cause, but there are enormous dangers to such an approach that you should be aware of before you even consider it. First of all, if a member of a group does something stupid, then the entire organization gets blamed. Not just blamed online or in the media, but it can be held liable legally. If you or your organization holds an event or promotes a protest and someone gets hurt, if violence breaks out, no matter which side started it or caused it, you may be held personally liable, either civilly or even criminally. Democrats have very well-funded law firms that they use to financially cripple their opponents. And even if you win a case brought against you, the legal bills are enough to bankrupt most people just defending against them. It may be better to become part of already well-established groups and then influence their members and then ultimately their leadership to move them further to the right and basically take them over. Being part of a movement can often be better than being part of an actual organization. One can be a supporter, a leader, or an influencer in a movement while remaining completely independent, but this still puts you at risk for civil and criminal penalties if you're blamed for inciting violence by using political rhetoric that's too heated, or even standard political analogies these days, talking about fighting or war. They'll get your private text messages, DMs, and emails. They'll use them as evidence against you, just like they did the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. And figures of speech and jokes will be framed as if you were being literal. And I know it sounds cliche, but be careful what you post on social media. It's probably better to create an anonymous account if you're using Twitter or X. Don't use your real name. Don't use your photo. Use a burner email address, not your usual one, in case the accounts get hacked and the login information gets published for our opponents to sift through, which does happen, allowing them to find other accounts on other platforms that use the same email address, leading them to find people's real identities. You should resist the urge to become a famous online personality. Many online accounts that have gained hundreds of thousands of followers or even over 1 million still keep their identity of those who run them completely unknown. Be careful not to cut your nose off to spite your face. Going on a rant, using the N-word to prove that you don't care what the thought police say isn't worth getting fired from your job over or getting banned from social media. Future potential employers will Google your name during the hiring process. And even if your rant doesn't make headlines, if you're named in tweets, on Facebook posts, and other social media platforms, those are going to come up during the vetting process. Even if you use a pseudonym for your social media presence, if you show your face, there's an extremely high probability that your actual identity will be found. There's facial recognition software that can find photos of you that others posted online from your family and friends accounts. Online sleuths can be ruthless and crafty in their quest to dox people, and someone who personally knows you may take it upon themselves to alert others who you are, like a former classmate, coworker, or ex-girlfriend or wife. But it doesn't even have to be something you post online. These days, if someone goes off on a racist or anti-Semitic rant in public that's caught on video, that video often goes viral and ultimately the person is identified, doxxed, and fired in hopes of appeasing the online angry mob who call and harass people's employers when they're the subject of a viral controversy. So even if you're not posting on social media at all, social media can still ruin your career from something that you say in real life. It's a brave new world, so pick your battles wisely. Some are in better positions to fight on certain fronts than others. If you're a retired veteran with a guaranteed pension and you have nothing to lose, that's different than an aspiring young college kid who could face a lifetime of limited career options if they happen to get the attention of the wrong people by pushing the envelope on certain controversial issues a little bit too far. With formidable foes dedicated to shutting down anyone speaking out too loudly about certain topics, people need to be careful before they end up with a target on their back. Each individual must carefully decide their own level of involvement. And this shouldn't need to be said, but no matter how frustrated you get, no matter how angry and disgusted you feel because of the onslaught of attacks against conservatives, our culture, religious traditions, our country by the enemies within, don't do anything violent. We've all seen how occasionally disgruntled and mentally disturbed people on the left and on the right lash out in violence against their perceived enemies, and it always hurts whatever cause they thought they were fighting for. It gains widespread sympathy for the victims and casts whatever cause the perpetrator thought they were fighting for in an extremely negative and toxic light. So when I talk about the war on conservatives, as far as our side is concerned, it's a political and metaphoric war. It's an information war. It's a battle of ideas. So don't be stupid like some misguided, self-proclaimed patriots in the past who have lashed out in violence, or those who think that wearing camo, training with a dozen others out in the woods to overthrow the government is going to do anything but cause disastrous consequences. Even in situations that could be deemed self-defense, one wrong decision in a split second could cost you your freedom. Some people shoot armed robbers after they turn around and head for the door and are charged with second-degree manslaughter because technically the threat to their life was over because the perpetrator was leaving. Violence is always ugly and should be avoided at all costs. And don't try arguing or reasoning with Marxists in the streets. They have a mob mentality because they are a mob. I've seen too many clips of patriots arguing with idiots in the streets. Things are going to get very tense over the next few weeks and months, no matter who's declared the winner of the election, especially if Donald Trump wins, because the left will stop at nothing to stop him from re-entering the White House. So we all have to remain calm and think very clearly and carefully about how we're going to deal with this thing, no matter how it turns out, because we're not in Kansas anymore. And we're going to find out real soon whether or not we're in the United States anymore. I'm Mark Dice. Subscribe to my channel if you're new here and check back on a regular basis. And stay tuned because I will see you soon, hopefully with a new president being announced.